Good morning to you. I want to thank the organizers of this wonderful conference in advance for convening a discussion on something which is very timely and very important. But I also want to thank you for making the effort of getting out here on a day like this, which is quite miserable and the weather is horrible and so on. Now, what I wanted to do in the time that I've got is to give you perhaps a picture of Jerusalem just before 1948, before the Palestine was smashed, before the Nakba, which it will be 70 years this year since that time. This picture that I want to give, which is personal, because it's drawn from members of my family, from my own very early childhood memories, and I believe I'm maybe the only one here who is, the only one on the panel anyway, who was born in 48 Palestine, Jerusalem. So basically, the first thing I want to get across is that Jerusalem, despite the population changes which have taken place because of Jewish immigration, was an Arab city. It felt like an Arab city. It was culturally an Arab city. And the people of Jerusalem, people like my family, felt themselves to be living in an Arab city. Now, they were well aware that there were incursions and the entrance, sometimes described as an invasion, of Jews from Europe into this Arab city, but it was very much seen in that light. Now, whereas if you look at population statistics for Jerusalem, you will observe that by 1944, by the 1940s, there was a Jewish majority in Jerusalem, something that had not been the case before. By the way, it's extraordinarily difficult to get proper population figures for Jerusalem, or indeed for anything which is to do with the Zionist claim to the country. We, as Palestinians, have to contend with not only the traumas and problems that the creation of Israel created for us, but the fight on facts, on historical facts, is really ongoing all the time. So the Zionist imperative to distort history, to lie about what really happened, to create things that never existed, is something constantly that Palestinians and others interested in Palestine have to fight. And it is the same with the population of Jerusalem. We do know this, at least, that in 1870, according to the Ottoman census, there was over 70% of the population of Jerusalem was Arab. By 1944, the proportions had become 40% Arab, 60% Jews. And that was due to almost entirely to immigration from outside. So it was not a natural majority. It's not something that really can be presented as to prove some point about Jerusalem being Jewish. It was not. And so the Jerusalem I'm talking about was Arab, it felt Arab. Now, my family lived in something that Sami referred to, the new suburbs, whatever you want to call them, which grew up outside the old city, some of them Jewish, but many of them Arab. We were in one of these places like, I was born in Qatamon, but I'm thinking of places like Talbiya, like Baqa, Sheikh Jarrah. These were included among the new Arab neighborhoods, where the people who lived there tended to be middle class, and fairly comfortably off. I would say to you that in the Jerusalem of that time, Arabs lived the typical social life of Arabs everywhere. Friends, socializing. My father had his friends, talked politics all the time. The women had their own receptions for each other. There was a mixed society, an open society. And of course, people were aware that there were changes. For example, the cinemas that Sami referred to, the new European cafes, the ice cream. My father used to take us children to an ice cream parlor, which had been established by a Polish Jew. And so there was this going on, but it was never seen as something which altered the basic character of Jerusalem or of Palestine, which continued to be Arab. Never did my parents envisage in a million years, in their worst nightmares, that their city would become what it is today, where Arabs form a 30% minority, where the Jewish presence is pervasive and oppressive, where 200,000 Jewish settlers live in this much expanded, artificially expanded city. 86% of the land is held by Jews, and this is an ongoing and growing project. The old city you would hardly recognize. It's a mixture between a museum and a battleground. And I tell you, I, for one, hate going to Jerusalem. I was born in that city, and I hate it because of what it has become. Ugly, commercialized, overbuilt, inflated. It was as Sami said, it was a small city. That was part of its charm. The old city was beautifully preserved. The heart of Jerusalem, of Palestine, of the Islamic world. All this has been traduced, is ugly and deformed, in my opinion. Now, the assault on Jerusalem by the Zionists was resisted again and again throughout the Mandate period. And you will know of some of the most famous of these riots, the Western Wall, the Wailing Wall riots in 1929, the Great Revolt, the major strike in 1936 to 39, but all to no avail. The attempts, the protests, the petitions, the pleas to the British to stop Jewish immigration, to stop the Zionist project, all fell on deaf ears, except for a few honorable exceptions among the occasional British High Commissioner and occasional major figure who recognized the injustice of what was happening. And then events taking an inexorable course led to the partition plan of 1947, the UN plan, which proposed something completely outrageous for Palestinians, the partition of Palestine. That it would be partitioned and half of it would be given to the invaders, the new settlers, and the other for the indigenous population. Completely outrageous. And you know, sometimes when I go and hear people, Zionists of course, arguing, well, you had your chance, you turned it down, 47 you were offered an Arab state, you turned it down. I even hear some Arabs say this, and it drives me insane, because if you think about it, the very idea that you would give up half your homeland to a group of foreign invaders and settlers, and just do that and accept it, and as it were with foresight of a type none of us has, would say, but the day will come when we would be so grateful even to have what the partition plan offered us, is ahistorical and it's completely unacceptable. So the march of events went inexorably on, and by April 1948, which is the month we left Palestine, we left Jerusalem and Palestine, the Zionists had made major advances. and particularly in West Jerusalem. That is the area where I was born, and which was the area they targeted first. And they did that by a variety of means which turned out to be highly successful. The Deir Yassin massacre is one that I would mention, April 1948, which happened in a village just contiguous to Jerusalem. The death of Abdul Qadir al-Husseini, a major patriotic figure for the Palestinians, a major leader who was killed by the Jewish army. And the fact that unfortunately, the Arabs themselves were not well led, they did not have a united leadership, and so on. So 30,000 people were driven out from West Jerusalem, 30,000 people, by the Zionists, employing various methods. And once Israel was created and had carved out for itself 78% of the old Palestine, it set about in 1950 making West Jerusalem into its capital city. And in fact, we know now that President Trump has assisted the Zionists in enabling them to spread their capital into the rest of Jerusalem. And so therefore the whole of Jerusalem, according to President Trump, is now the capital of Israel. It's interesting to note, though nobody now looks at this history because it seems to be so irrelevant, that the United Nations admitted Israel in 1949, admitted it as a member on condition that it respected international laws already passed by the UN, one of which was that Jerusalem would be an international city not belonging to the new Israel or to the Palestinians. I always think that this corpus separatum idea is also an insult to the Palestinians. Why would we want an international administration when we consider this an Arab city and the heart of the Islamic world? So, just let me end on, because the time is short, why did it happen? How did it happen? How did we lose Jerusalem? How did we Palestinians lose Jerusalem? Well, that's a very long subject. I wish I had time to go into it, but it's a very important subject because it's very instructive as to the rest of Palestine. How did we lose Palestine in the way that we did? And I just want to end up on this note that you may be aware that there is to be an official royal visit to Israel shortly by the Duke of Cambridge, Prince William, and his wife Kate. This comes at a time when President Trump has committed an illegal act by recognizing something that is illegal, so that in a way endorses the Trump initiative. It comes at a time when the Prime Minister of Israel is in deep trouble with the authorities, undergoing investigation for crimes presumed to have been committed. And it comes at a time just following the 100th anniversary of the Balfour Declaration, which the British were responsible for. They lost us Palestine at the beginning, and they're putting the seal on that act by sending the first official delegation, royal family, to Israel to approve, presumably, the creation that they started in 1917. No amount of argument which says that this is being done to save the Conservative government's skin because they're going for Brexit, they desperately need trade, they desperately need to please Israel and the United States, so that's why they do. No amount of this argument can negate the fact that this is an insult to the Palestinian people, to their history and to their sufferings, and on the 70th anniversary of the loss of Palestine.